Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Versus Stars podcast third season. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Justin Cook boards mothership. It's got SWAT, Eldritch Blue on Zoot. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Coke. Thank you so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. It'll be fun.
Thank you so much. So I always start with a question of inspiration. So inspire your love for comics and who your earliest influences.
Uh, well, my I guess my first connection with comics was the Sunday comics page, right? I would read, I think it was Prince Valiant and Garfield and all that stuff. Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes. Um, yeah, I really loved Calvin and Hobbes back in the day. I think everybody loves Calvin and Hobbes, so that's not exactly unique. And then, I had a lot of those Archie omnibus things they used to sell at the grocery store. Um, and then Sandman I was obsessed with Sandman in high school.
Hmm.
Since then I've really picked up the indie comic scene over the last few years and been reading pretty much everything. I mean, not everything, but quite a bit. Bun, Lemire,
Yep.
Reminder, Marjorie Liu, all that kind of stuff.
So, oh, I'm also a huge fan of Sandman. I actually, it's the only books I bought the omnibuses of. The big fat books for Sandman, and I've read those so many times. I will say his books are probably the closest thing to like true, like classic literature for comic books than we've ever seen.
I could see that. Yeah. It holds up really well,
Yeah.
especially for stuff that came out in the 90s. There's not a lot of oh crap, uh-oh. So but no, story-wise it's really great. I mean, honestly, I haven't read any of his novels in a long time, but I think Sandman's better than the
Hmm.
novels I've read. I mean, I don't think a lot of people would agree with that, but uh
I'll say Season of Mist comes as close to perfection as any storyline ever gets.
yeah. No, it's definitely a huge inspiration. I mean, I would love to do something on that level. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't want to be the insane person that thinks SWAT is on that level, uh, but
So, as we were saying, you're the writer of SWAT, Eldritch Blue issue one. What inspired the creation of the series?
well, I honestly, it just sort of came to me like a lightning strike. I think I was generally annoyed with J.K. Rowling, and so the concept of kind of messing with her came along, um, and then it just hit. I don't. I guess the special secret wizard assault team thing came first, and then it sort of went, how do we make that not stupid, and how do we make that not stupid, and then before you know it, you have a 36 issue comic. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The first step is right to figure out what's not stupid. The idea is to take something weird and strange and then try to make it workable in a real sense of a story. What was the part of when you're in that process of going with an idea that you thought could be a little silly, as a lot of fantasy can be, and make it into something that's interesting and readable and is something that adults are going to get captured by.
um with SWAT, I mean, more so than usual, but I'm definitely a pantser. I mean, I might have a vague concept of where I want to go, but there's usually two or three of those by the time I actually wrap it up. And I like it that way. So it just hit. I wrote the first issue, and then it was issue four where I was like, oh my, oh, like that's where I feel like I went kind of into warp speed in terms of just me being able to me writing it. Um, and I really enjoy. I mean, to me, a lot of the fun of storytelling is figuring out how to, you know, get there, right? And
Mm.
or when the characters take on a life of their own and start doing things that are really inconvenient for you, that's a sign you're really cooking, I think. So,
Now, one thing that J.K. Rowling did do well in her Harry Potter books is that she laid early groundwork for storylines and aspects and the details are going to come out much later in her series. When you're writing SWAT Eldritch Blue, how are you laying down those breadcrumbs now, or do you are you even knowingly doing so with your consciously doing so that you know when did you get to issue 4 and so on are starting to pop up?
That is an interesting. Okay, so I think I'm subconsciously doing it,
Mhm.
right? I mean, sometimes I'm definitely doing it on purpose, but a lot of the times I just sort of set it up, and then later I'm like, yeah. I mean, a lot of my storytelling process yeah, I'm not fully aware of what I'm doing. Um, if that makes sense. I mean, I think about it intellectually a lot, and I will sit there with a notebook and like work through things. But once it's going, it's definitely kind of
Mm.
a lot of pantsing, you know.
Now, two great writers in history, J. J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin, were known famously to have just started writing without any kind of outline. They just kind of just like go for it. Are you follow that approach where you're basically just going for it, or are you creating kind of a plot beforehand going, I need to be here, 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 and here?
Like I said, I mean, it's kind of like driving at night. Like I have headlights that I can see a few hundred feet ahead, but past that, it's just darkness. I mean, I might have a vague, I had 3 or 4 different endings for SWAT in mind before, and they all evaporated, and I went in a completely different way.
Hmm.
That I like, but it can change. I mean, I'm building this at the same time. The fun of it is kind of it's I guess it's kind of like Minecraft or something. I enjoy building it as I go and dealing with the problems that arise and fixing it. And what I really like about comics is that it's so imaginatively free, right? You can have anything going on. I'm reading a comic right now about a Grim Reaper who lost her scythe, and now I haven't finished it, but that causes a bunch of weird adventures. I don't know. I feel like that would be harder to pull off in a novel, just uh but it's also deeply structured at the same time because you've got 22 pages, 21, 22 pages, and you have to have an arc, if you're going to write a really great issue, it has to work. Every single panel has to work. Uh,
Hmm.
there's no room for lameness at all, which I really enjoy.
Now, as someone who has to build this entire world, I mean, obviously you're the architect, or your god, as it were, of the entire world of SWAT. Um, Being how you're, kind of building as you go, how does that impact the world building aspect of writing it? Which you're, because I assume that when you get to issue 4, you're like, oh, I kind of wish I felt like I had that, mentioned that in issue 1 or 2 or 3, made sure I had that part of the world there.
Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes you do have to go back and tweak things. I mean, I have nothing against rewriting if needed. Uh, but like, I mean, for instance, um, Tiny Tim has a magic murder bag where he can reach in and get whatever, right? And so that ended up kind of taking over the story in a lot of ways because I got into a jam, and so I made it so that you could go into the bag yourself, or someone could reach in and grab you and pull you out, and all that. And having instant teleportation and anything you want, way more powerful than I thought. So I ended up having to, that ended up kind of taking over the story, and kind of had to get rid of it, at the end, uh, to have any chance of, being able to write anything else without it just being the magic murder bag, doing stuff. Uh, so sometimes it grows in ways that you don't expect, and it can cause problems, but I have an instinct. I think I've developed an instinct for wrong paths, right? Usually I can stop myself after a couple thousand words and go, this sucks. What is not right here? And then go back and think about it and figure out where I went wrong. If the characters are ever shopping, that is a dead, that is a red flag that I went wrong somewhere a few pages before. I mean, that I've noticed that pattern multiple times, because when you're writing a novel or whatever, if you're writing a novel, at least for me, every 30, 40,000 words, you've got about 10,000 words of just pulling teeth. Even if you can't tell afterwards, it looks the same, but it was just agony to get through those 10,000 words. And that's where the shopping often happens. And I have to just go back and figure out what the hell I was doing wrong, because there's always something wrong. Um, you know, so
So, the artist on the project is Rachel Disler. Am I saying it correctly?
just, yeah, Disler, I think.
Disler. So how did this team first start, and what does Rachel bring to the table?
Uh, I basically I was hanging out on a comics Discord server and somebody was talking about her and I ended up seeing her stuff and I'm like, that is exactly what I need. Like she really, it was love at first sight on that in that sense. I was just like, this is exactly what I need for this project. And so yeah, we started working together and it's been great. You know, she's really talented and she's a lot of fun to work with.
So, the protagonist of the series is Larry Slaughter, correct?
Yeah,
So you described him, and I will say I had the good fortune of reading the script, um, and I say it's really fun. It's like really good dark satire, so I appreciate that. And you described him as being kind of a down and out Harry Potter, which I
yeah.
thought is a great description. So the question is, was he always like this? And how much of the backstory will we get about how he became the down and out cop as Harry Potter cop as you
Well,
see?
it ends up kind of, especially for the first 18 issues, uh, his character and why he is the way he is sort of an understated, the sort of the secret theme of the whole thing. Maybe not secret, but I mean, it opens with the comic opens with October 20th or April 20th, 1999, and clear echoes of Columbine, a school shooting in which he ends up shooting his version of Voldemort, essentially, and that ruined his life. And basically, he became an alcoholic, you know, doing all, well, in England, they call it drink driving. So, you know, he basically was a minor celebrity for a while and then crashed out hard. And so he's basically like one of Britney Spears' early husbands, you know, in some sense. Um, and so he's just in St. Louis because that's where he's from in this world and just grinding out his 20 years until he gets his pension.
How does he feel about the path that his life has taken?
Uh, well, there's been a lot of, I mean, if he had the chance to do it differently, he would very much do it differently, right? Like if that event hadn't happened, presumably his life would be a lot happier. Um, but you know, and him dealing with the trauma of that event, and there's some secrets that he's keeping about that whole thing. And resolving those is a big part of his arc as a character.
So another cool thing about the story is what's called the Great Bargain. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about what the Great Bargain is?
Well, back about 1,000 years ago, there was a bit of a war between monsters and humans. Um, well, actually, that's not quite accurate, but any point, there was an agreement made where basically the monsters get hunting tags where they have a certain amount of people that they're allowed to kill. And then, but if they break the rules, guys like Slaughter or SWAT will come in and shoot them in the face. And that's the bargain, right? You stay within these limited bounds, you're fine. You like for instance, I have one scene where this monster thinks he's in St. Louis County and he has a tag for St. Louis County, but he's actually in St. Charles County. And this is actually legitimate St. Louis geography.
Yeah.
He's in the Six Flags trying to kill children. The Six Flags is actually in a different county, but you'd think it was in St. Louis from the map. Anyway, point being, that kind of level of niggling technicality can be the difference between life or death sometimes. So he was in the wrong county, he gets shot. So yeah, he had his tag.
So for the Great Bargain, was it a better bargain for people or for the monsters?
That is up for debate. Mimi is she's his you know, co-worker slash girlfriend sometimes. She thinks that humans got the worst end of it because they're collaborating with evil and that makes them evil. And Larry is like, it is what it is. We're part of a food chain and we're not at the top of ours. You know,
Hmm.
so he's like, this is the practical solution to the problem. So uh, you know, the reader can kind of figure out for himself who's getting the better end of it.
So this is what kind of I was thinking is, so back when there was this bargain, who represented the monsters in creating this bargain? I mean, are there a monster Illuminati group that's making this stuff? Is it
Yeah,
how does
it's
that
called the Guild of Monstrosity, and it's sort of like an evil Optimist Club. where they have charters everywhere, and I mean, uh, yeah, so it's like a semi-formal government run by psychopaths. So it's not a very good one. Uh, yeah. So
As we talk about SWAT, even though Larry Slaughter is the main character, it's definitely a large cast. So, who are the members of SWAT? What motivates them? Are they all motivated by doing good, or are they motivated by just the fact that like killing monsters, or is it just like that's just what they do?
they're kind of all burnt out. I don't know. Um, so okay, so there's Larry, there's Mimi, we kind of covered her. There's Hermes. He is 3,000 years old. He's very senile and he won't retire. There's Tiny Tim, who's just kind of like a bit of a jock, but he's kind of there. He's about this tall, and he's the wet work guy who breaks in and like installs secret cameras and stuff, because that's where the bag comes in really handy. Um, and then there's Mabelina, who is she thinks she's a fake psychic, but she's a real psychic. In that, she is always attracted to the worst possible decision. So they kind of keep her around as the reverse canary in a coal mine. Like
Yeah.
if she really wants to do something, they don't go to that movie, right? Uh, so she's based on a person I knew who I represented because I'm a lawyer, and she just had an unholy ability to say the exact wrong thing, like instantaneously, like an AI, just like if you ask an AI, what should I not say right now? Boom, and then she'd pop it out. It was like it was remarkable. Um, that was the inspiration for Mabelina.
Are they a functional team together, or
Yeah, mostly. I mean, they can be, you know, uh Mabelina in particular, it can be pretty hard to handle sometimes, but for the most part, they oh, and I forgot Lisa, who is the normie. She's there as punishment because she testified against some other cops. So they stuck her there as punishment. Um, and so she's like learning. She doesn't even realize that it's real for like 6 months because they just had her handling 911 calls and she thought it was all cranks. Um, so she's in there. They like each other, like they're fundamentally care about each other quite a bit. And in fact, I think the only thing that kind of keeps them from quitting or losing their minds is the fact that they are there protecting each other. So,
so because of with some of the Great Bargain, there's monsters. How aware are the regular people of this whole part, and how easy is it to, or is it even the responsibility of SWAT to keep the secret of these monsters walking around?
um, I think I thought about this quite a bit, and I think it's just sort of a thing where people choose to ignore it. It's not a secret. They're not trying to keep it secret.
Hmm.
It's just that people will just chalk it off, and all the mages and the wizards and stuff don't even realize it because they're like, all these movies are about us, all this TV is about us. You clearly know that we're out here,
Hmm.
right? And so they just don't even fully realize that everyone else is kind of like, you're fake, And so it's just um, sort of like that.
So, I mean, I think it's fantastic what you did. You created like you combine fantasy with this hard-boiled kind of crime story. Um, I don't know if I inherently in my head would have combined these two as something that makes sense, but it works. So, as you're writing, how easily do these two genres mesh?
I feel like it worked meshed really, really well. I mean, I love doing combining weird stuff and just getting like right in your face with how absurd it is.
Hmm.
Like just straight face play out the most ridiculous thing. It's kind of my jam. So I mean, I don't think it's that far. I mean, it's not that far off from like a Jim Butcher type of situation, except it's like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Dresden Files type of deal.
Hmm.
Uh, and there's a lot more to it. I mean, it's all over the place. It's got a lot going on.
So, we talked a lot about the protagonist of the story. Who's the primary antagonist of the series?
That I'm not going to talk about because it's kind of spoilery.
Okay.
It's kind of an onion layer of villainy at the bottom. so you don't really know who the main guy is until pretty late. But the first villain is Stephanus, who is a vampire, who they have not framed because he definitely did it, but they called in a tip, which is kind of a violation of the grand bargain to tip on anyway. So they chase him down, and he's the bad guy for the first arc, and then that leads to the second guy, who leads to the third guy, and it's sort of a conspiracy unraveling thing that they don't
Well,
even realize they're in for a lot of it.
I mean, a lot of, I mean, obviously, when you talk about monsters, the assumption always is the monsters are always definitely the bad guys. However, are the humans totally good guys in this? I mean, are they as villainous on their own level?
Well, I mean, I gotta say, Larry is a morally ambiguous person. He has been living in an ultra violent nightmare world for 20 years, so he's pretty fast on the draw.
Yeah,
Like he does not feel like he needs to make sure that his, he will just shoot you if you're a monster and you're not in, you know. So he does a lot of stuff that I mean, part of what I'm doing with him a little bit is I want the reader to be like, if I could alter reality at will, would I be better or worse than him? Because there's a pretty
hmm.
good chance you would be worse than him if you could do whatever you wanted.
Right, right.
Um, so he's as moral as being able to do whatever you want allows, I guess. So, um, but the monsters are morally ambiguous too. One of the characters who, is whatever. His name is Praise God, and he was raised in a cult, and left the cult, and he's basically Slender Man. And he thinks that he is cursed to be a monster, and so he's trying to live out his monstrosity as like a god's quest type of deal.
Yeah.
Eventually he's like, this sucks, I don't want to be a monster. And there's other monsters that are not, like there's one guy there's a South American monster called and I'm probably botching the pronunciation, Pishtaco,
Okay.
uh, and they suck fat out of people, right? So in this world, he's just a plastic surgeon who makes ass loads of money because he can just suck all your fat out, no surgeries, no anesthesia.
Hmm.
He just sort of slurps it out magically. So he's making bank, but he's still technically a monster, even though he's got a job and it's not
Right,
really
right.
monstrous. So it's all over the place.
So another interesting is because when a character you have like Larry thought who is morally ambiguous, how do you make sure that the audience does have that kind of empathy with him and do kind of still attach to someone who is maybe not the best?
Well, Larry has his issues, but his heart's in the right place. Like if you're on his team, he will take a bullet for you.
Hmm.
And and then a lot of the things he's doing are not necessarily cruel. They're just maybe a little quick on the draw, or something like that. Um, writing this in this era, with defund the police and everything, it was especially touchy, right? Because as a lot of he's kind of he's not for police brutality, but he's definitely done things that
Hmm.
you know and so that was I think part of what drove me to write it was sort of exploring these issues of like where is the line
Hmm.
between good policing and bad policing.
Hmm.
Now granted, it's in a moral universe where there are literal vampires, so it's maybe not that useful for real life, but um that was definitely part in my mind when I was writing it was him kind of, well, he talks about this at one point, like what he would like to do is to be able to believe that anyone might be good again,
Hmm.
and that's kind of his arc, is him getting to the point where uh he can make that leap again.
Well, I mean that's poses an interesting question about the monsters. Are they then bad or are they just living their nature?
Well, their nature is bad, so I don't know. I mean, like that would definitely be their argument, is this is who I am, this is what I do. You don't get mad at lions for eating gazelles, so I'm a Dracula. You can't be mad I suck blood. Sure, you can kill me because that's fair. whatever, but don't be mean to me about it. You know what I mean? But some of them are, just some of them are monsters in the sense that they're, you know, like there's a Evil Dead type creature. He's just awful. He's called Skank. Terrible taste in cars, really vicious. Loves chainsaws. But and he's definitely very monstrous. And there's other people that are just humans who love being a monster. They just like being a dick. So it's all very zany. It is not intended to be kind of a Star Wars universe where you've got Sith over here and Jedi over
Yeah.
here. Sith, Jedi, depends on the day, a little bit.
So I was gonna say, because their idea monster is definitely a human perspective. I'm sure they'd be like, "Where is what we?" It's like we eat. Like I eat cow. Obviously, but I don't know. I mean, sure, the cow thinks I'm a monster, but I think cows are delicious. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely another theme is, uh is monsters, are they what makes you a monster, and what doesn't make you a monster. And I kind of come down at the point where it, I'm less interested in calling you a monster if you're weird and more if you're a selfish prick, right? So I think that's where I end up.
So many humans would be monsters, and so
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I can
Uh,
think of plenty of them.
so, um, what was it? Oh, I mean, like at one point they're at a convention for monsters on a cruise ship. That's not relevant. But one of the panel discussions is between Jack the Ripper and Adolf Hitler's frozen head of quantity or quality. So I don't know. I don't know. The humor in the monster world's very like dark because that's
Hmm.
you show, what does a monster think is normal is kind of the joke, and that would be, you know, so it can get pretty dark in Monster World, but I'm not going to take any blame for it because what else are you supposed to do?
So, where might our listeners find SWAT Eldritch Blue?
Right now, it's on Zoop.
Mr. Koch, been an absolute pleasure talking with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Have a
night.
fantastic night.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Divergent Stars podcast. Please help me better the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to turn for the next episode when Riley Alizraki boards the mothership to discuss Star Trek Prodigy, now on Netflix. Until next voyage, travel on.